Protect your DNA. BioPQQ can promote formation of new mitochondria. Infowarsstore.com.
Joining us tonight is Michelle Rowton. Now, she is a founding board member of Nurses Against Mandatory Vaccines, NAMV.org. They are against mandatory vaccines for healthcare professionals. Now, she is a neonatal nurse, practitioner in multiple neonatal intensive care units with over 13 years experience. And before we go to her, I just want to remind you of the AMA Code of Ethics. This is their opinion about informed consent, what they have to say. The patient's right of self-decision can be effectively exercised only if the patient possesses enough information to enable an informed choice. The patient should make his or her own determination about treatment. The physician's obligation is to present the medical facts accurately to the patient or to the individual responsible for care and to make recommendations for management in accordance with good medical practice. The physician has an ethical obligation to help the patient make choices from among the therapeutic alternatives consistent with good medical practice. Informed consent is a basic policy in both ethics and law that physicians must honor. And they go on to say, unless the patient is unconscious or incapacitated. We are now throwing away our code of ethics. We are now throwing away our fundamental rights that have, as humans, that have been recognized in the Constitution, the 9th and 10th Amendment, saying if we don't explicitly give power to the government, then we retain that power. They're renaming our informed consent personal belief exemptions. You're not informed, you just have a personal belief. And they don't have to get consent from us because we're merely slaves. Anything they allow us to do is an exemption. We're going to talk to Michelle Rowton and find out what nurses have been struggling with for a very long time as this tyranny is now rolling out to the broader population. Thank you for joining us, Michelle. Now, this is something, the removal of informed consent, that is kind of new to most people in the general population, but for nurses, you've been struggling with this for quite some time. Tell us about Nurses Against Mandatory Vaccines, when that started, and why you started it.
Well, Nurses Against Mandatory Vaccines was founded a couple of years ago by Amy Kenyon, a nurse who wanted to fight against mandatory vaccines for employment. We really have seen this coming down the pike for, 5 years ago. They were really coming after us with the forms to sign, and, Joint Commission is saying that we have to prove that we are offering the shot to every single little nurse and healthcare worker. And so we really saw it coming down the pike, and there were warnings, and there were some of us saying, hey, everybody needs to pay attention because this is coming. And then about 2 years ago, there were some that started 3 years ago. They started with the mandatory vaccines. And most hospital systems in the country are requiring for all hospital staff to be vaccinated with the flu vaccine to keep their jobs to provide for their families.
And so what we've seen in the past is that they basically bring economic pressure. Many times it's coming from the federal government against the hospitals. And then they push that economic pressure to people to say, well, we strongly encourage you to do that. And then it just comes down to the fact that you're going to do this or you're going to lose your job type of thing. Now we're seeing that in the general population, coming against school children and saying, you're going to have these vaccines or you're not going to go to school, and we'll hold your parents as if you are truant. Or in some cases, in other countries, they are taking away people's benefits. I mean, and then we've got all this legislation that's being introduced across the country that would just say, you don't have a right to informed consent. Talk to people about that, because we don't even need to get into, we can talk about the efficacy, the safety, and the other issues of vaccines, but it really kind of comes down to the ethical issue of whether or not you can force people to have any kind of medical treatment. And that's a very dangerous idea.
Even a lot of hospital personnel are very unaware that there is a hospital value-based purchasing program that is requiring or wanting 90% vaccination rate of hospital personnel and threatening them with a 2% loss.
Exactly.
As a bonus in their income. And when that happens and it's the bottom line and it's about money and we have Obamacare and we have Medicare spending cut, every 2% is a very big deal to these hospital systems.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a big deal.
Now you have the people who are supposed to be providing informed consent for every single patient who walks through that door. That's our ethical obligation, that we provide them with information about what it is we think they need, and they're allowed to say yes or no. But now you have an entire building full of people who have had that right taken away from them.
Absolutely.
So
First, it becomes about the mandatory, about the stick, the economic stick, trying to force people to have this. And then they get to the point, as they are now, to just say, forget about everything. We're just going to take away your rights as an individual to have any information about your medical treatment, and we don't care if we get your consent or not.
Right. And we, Nurses Against Mandatory Vaccines, and specifically myself on radio and everything else, I've been saying over and over again for 2 years, it is not just us. It's not just the nurses. You can't just say, oh, it's just the nurses, oh, it's just the hospital staff. They will come for you next.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
You're seeing that even in Texas with the teachers. They're coming after the teachers for mandatory flu vaccines on the tail end of a season where the flu shot showed 16% effectiveness.
Absolutely. And we saw this case, the senator who introduced a bill that would take away people's informed consent in Oregon. Her name is Senator Steiner Hayward, and she is also a physician. And when they were having the hearings, there was a lawyer who basically called her out on her hypocrisy. He pointed out that even though she suffers from muscular dystrophy and she takes interferon, her physician and the drug company both told her that she should stop interferon while she was doing breastfeeding. She did her own research. She contacted people directly at universities. She felt that it was safe to continue with the interferon while she was breastfeeding. And so she went against the advice of her physician, against the advice of the pharmaceutical company. And she got very upset about that. She said, how dare you criticize me for that? And he says, I'm merely pointing out, we want to have the same freedom to make the same choices for ourselves and for our children that you had in this particular instance. It wasn't about the vaccines. It was about a particular drug, and she had a right of informed consent. She was very incensed that somebody would question her judgment about that, question her actions, and yet she would not allow people to have that same freedom in their individual lives.
Yes, I remember watching that video and just being shocked that, and it's not just her, it's an entire country full of people that cannot cross that kind of common sense into vaccines. It is such a highly polarized topic, and people are so angry that we're having a hard time getting people to step back and say, hey, if they can make you do this, what is it that they can make you do next? And if they can make the nurses do it, then they can make the teachers do it. And then they can do it to all the children, and they can take parental rights away. And it's just a slippery slope that keeps going.
Well, we know exactly what they can do because we've seen the history of this. We know that at the Nuremberg trials, one of the things that came out of that was the Nuremberg Code, which said that you must have informed consent in all cases, because if you don't have informed consent, eventually you're going to get down, as you point out, to this slippery slope where they start doing medical experimentation on people, heinous experiments that they did in the concentration camps, that the Japanese doctors also did, justifying it in the name of the greater good of society. Anything can be justified in the name of the greater good of society. And we have to realize that society is never going to be a good society if you trample on the rights of the individuals that make up that society. That's the fundamental issue, I think.
It is the fundamental issue. And I think that what is going on in this country right now with legislation all across the country, and you said we don't even have to talk about statistics and side effects and things like that, but there's these intense conversations going on that don't even involve what is ethically correct, and it's not involving what actually is the truth. So we're spending all this time and money trying to make this group have a flu shot that was 16% effective, knowing that the Department of Justice, March 5th, 2015, for the previous quarter, settled 92 cases, and 73 of them were for flu shot injuries.
Yes, and of course we have the vaccine court, the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986. That's been around for a very long time, which takes away most of your rights if you are damaged by a pharmaceutical vaccine. People should be questioning why we have a vaccine court, why it is necessary to have that. It seems to me like they were admitting when they did it back in 1986 that they were having so many cases that they needed to set up this court that would not allow you to sue so they can continue on with vaccines. We talked at the beginning of the program how they're using financial punishment to force hospital systems to get their staff vaccinated. But of course, there is a huge financial incentive for the vaccine companies to push this when they don't have any liability. And we should all ask, why are we being forced to buy and to inject a product for which the manufacturers don't have any personal liability?
We need to ask that question, and we need to follow the dollar at all times.
Yes.
You know, if we're down, I'm down in Texas at the Capitol fighting, and it's like, if I feel like I can get down there and away from my patient load for one day, that I've been victorious. But, you know, I walk away from there and I realize those pharmaceutical reps are there every single day, and there's a lot of them, and they throw around a lot of money.
Yes.
And it's happening every single day. And we need to pay attention to, is this about money, or are we really talking about people and what's best for them and what's ethically correct about that I can make a decision about my body for myself? Exactly.
I think we are losing our fundamental human rights for the profits of the pharmaceutical companies. And the reason I say that is because look at the fact that just within the last couple of years, they announced that they were going to stop all work on antibiotics. They were going to focus solely on vaccines. And if you look at every single kind of treatment that they're coming up for every possible malady or disease, they're calling everything a vaccine. And clearly they have a financial incentive to do this if there's a national vaccine court that takes away their liability. They can produce these pharmaceutical products with zero liability and then force us with a gun to our head to take their products. It's an absolutely amazing scam. This makes the bank bailouts that happened the first part of the early 2000s, that makes that look like nothing compared to this, because they're able to hold a gun to your head, force you to buy their product. If it damages you or your family, you don't have any compensation from it except from a court, which is kind of an arbitration process. It's not a real compensation process.
Right. I mean, when you're looking at how many cases are brought and how many cases are settled, there's an inordinate amount of money that has been paid out, but percentage-wise of people that go through the trauma of doing that and stick through all the years that it takes and then finally get the money, I mean, what really could be paid out in this country is very big.
Yes.
And it's deeper and it's more insidious than that. You know, I really believe that the greatest coup that's been pulled over on this country by Western medicine, backed by all this money of Big Pharma and their protection and all the money they're making and throwing, is the convincing of the women in this country as a whole to ignore their maternal instincts.
Yes.
I mean, it's deep.
While we're talking about that, speak to the issue that now they're removing the recommendations that pregnant women not get vaccinated because this is something that's been there for a very long time, but now they're moving that back. So can you speak to that? Have you seen that?
I can. I've seen that, you know, especially being around the NICU and being on postpartum floors and seeing what's going on. I'm just absolutely dumbfounded, because all you have to do is go pull the vaccine insert and they will say on there, not approved for pregnant and lactating women.
Yes. Let me ask you
over and over again.
Yes, absolutely. And since you're a neonatal nurse, let me ask you what your opinion is. I know we've had a lot of doctors saying that they believe that we're vaccinating the children too early with too many vaccines, that in and of itself has caused a lot of problems because they don't have an immune system that's developed to be effective even for this, but it also presents dangers to them with the preservatives and the adjuvants. So do you have an opinion on that?
I do. I think we are doing them too young. I think we are doing way too many at once if you just look at how fast the schedule has grown. But I think what a lot of people don't realize in a closed space like a NICU is they've decided that we need to vaccinate these babies on time. 2 months after they're born, bam, there it goes. This baby could be 4 months early and still supposed to be inside their mother and weighing 3 or 4 pounds and
Wow, that's
getting
a good
the
point.
same amount of vaccine as a 200-pound man. And I've sat in a room with all of our on-call staff, physicians and practitioners, like, oh, wow, this is so embarrassing. This 25-weeker never actually required a breathing tube and going on the vent, after he was born. He was so strong, but we gave him his 2-month vaccinations and he got intubated last night. Ha, 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 oops, how embarrassing. Like, it's funny.
Wow.
I mean,
Wow.
the step-down units are calling the NICU saying, hey, we're going to go ahead and give these 4 babies their 2-month shots today. Make sure you have beds ready because we all know they're going to have increased breathing difficulty, feeding and digestion difficulty, apnea, forgetting to breathe, and bradycardia. This is what goes on. And so
the whole medical ethic of first do no harm just goes out the door so they can follow the vaccine company's schedule.
Somehow it's just everybody's on this straight, they're marching the line of this is what we need to do. And so now that I'm in private practice in the clinics, you just see these kids, they are so sick and they come in sick and a lot of pediatricians are giving them vaccines while they're sick, even though that is a contraindication, and they're just getting kicked while they're down over and over and over again. So chronic ear infections, of course, the autism rate, 1 in 64, who knows what the number is going to be next.
Yes.
Eczema, all sorts of just asthma, all sorts of problems going on. And we just keep towing the line. I really don't understand.
And of course, speak to this issue of herd mentality. This is, I'm sorry, I keep calling it herd mentality because that's what it is. They talk about herd immunity, okay? And they try to point out that, they're only going to be safe if everybody gets the vaccine. That's how they scare everybody about this. But of course, as we've reported at Infowars.com, we've got students at a school that had a 99.5% vaccination rate for whooping cough. Nevertheless, they had one child come down with it and transmitted it to 3 more of his 5th grade peers. We had a case in Canada, in Quebec, where 52 of 98 teens caught the measles and they had been fully vaccinated. We had a case in New York in 2011 where a twice vaccinated person came down with measles and then transmitted it to 4 other people, 2 of which had vaccine records that they had been vaccinated twice. The other 2 had antibodies indicating that they had been vaccinated. So herd immunity isn't really going to protect anybody, is it?
No, it's not. That was a great theory when we thought that vaccines would give lifetime immunity like natural disease. And of course, we figured out that it hasn't. So we've got all these adults walking around upset that there might be a kid out there around their kid that's not vaccinated, but they're completely non-immune at this point. And it just, it's virology. Viruses change. They will always outsmart, I think. And, everybody's upset about the measles, and we've got, Japan at a 99% vaccination rate, and they have the biggest outbreak right now. So it's a nice theory, but I on my desk, the infectious diseases in children newsletter here in the front page. Unpredictability remains the one constant with seasonal influenza, admitting that last year had dismal results. And at the end of that article, what does it say? But you all should still be making sure that every single one of your patients is vaccinated for the flu this next season.
Wow. And
I read it and I just go, I don't understand how all these other providers are reading this and going, okay, well, that's what it says at the end of the article, so I'm going to do it.
It just amazes me when I see all those flu vaccines that are being sold in grocery stores and drugstores. I mean, I guess you can get one at a filling station pretty soon along with your fill-up. When I see that, when I see the vaccine court that removes their liability, when I see them taking away our informed consent, all of those things tell me that something is wrong. And of course, people can look into the medical issues, inform themselves, and then tell the government that you can't do things to us without our consent. It's very important, I think, that we all stand up and resist this. But in the time that we've got left, we're nearly out of time. Tell us a little bit about your organization. If someone is a nurse and they are getting pressured where they work to have a mandatory vaccine, tell us about how you help people and tell us about your organization.
Well, Nurses Against Mandatory Vaccines, we do have a website. It's www.namv.org. We also have a very active Facebook page with over 20,000 members. We are trying to keep people updated on what's going on legislation, all the studies that are coming out. We have a couple of vaccine lawyers that we work with. And so we're really right now trying to provide support, provide information, especially with the nurses, letting them know, you're not the only one out there dealing with having to find a medical exemption or turning in a religious exemption and wearing a mask from whatever day they say the flu starts until whatever day they say the flu magically ends, usually March 31st. And so we're really trying to round people up. And I was very impressed with the teachers this week in Texas. They came out in full force, and we're thinking that bill's going to fizzle because there was such just animosity against that bill. And so really just to support nurses and standing up for themselves. I think there's a lot of fear about how am I going to provide for my family. There's a lot of nurses that are the sole providers for their households. And so that's really what we're up against.
Yes. That's a really underhanded thing to do to people. Thank you so much, Michelle Rowton. And of course, nurses have been on the front line of medical care, and now you're on the front line fighting medical tyranny. I really appreciate you doing that. And the website again is namv.org. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
I'll just close the program with a quote from one of our founders, Benjamin Rush, who warned us about medical tyranny. He said, unless we put medical freedom into the Constitution, the time will come when medicine will organize into an undercover dictatorship to restrict the art of healing to one class of men, or as we understand it, to one gigantic industry that owns the government and thinks that they own you, the pharmaceutical companies. If you're not a subscriber to our YouTube channel, please subscribe there. It's free. But we hope that you will subscribe to Prison Planet TV and support us financially. If you do, you'll be able to get the news as it happens each Monday through Friday at 7 Central, and you can share that with up to 20 other individuals simultaneously, as well as having access to all of Alex Jones's documentaries. Stay with us, though. Right after the break, we have a special report from Alex Jones on Jade Helm. We'll be right back.
Infowars Life and InfowarsLife.com is extremely excited to announce our latest release, Winter Sun, a revolutionary type of vitamin D3. Winter Sun is a premium quality vitamin D3 nutritional supplement. It is produced by extracting oil from healthy, nutrient-dense plants known as lichens. Every batch is analyzed for purity and D3 content. It's completely free of toxins and allergens. Simply put, if you want the best at an extremely low price, this is it. Winter Sun is the result of our pursuit of the best source of vitamin D3. The research and development took over 2 years, but the result, as verified by independent laboratories, is the best vegan vitamin D3 product in the world. Read the facts at InfowarsLife.com about Winter Sun Vitamin D3. Not only does vitamin D3 promote a healthy mood, but vitamin D supports our memory and brain function, something the globalists are targeting. Visit Infowars.com today or call 888-253-3139.